Today I want to welcome Ellen Red. She is a psychic medium, channel, spiritual teacher, lecturer, and writer. She has appeared on multiple radio shows, podcasts, and has worked with thousands of people around the world. Ellen, welcome. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for coming on today. We're going to have a great conversation. This is your first time on, and there are several modalities that you work with that myself and the audience, I'm sure, is very interested in hearing about. You work with remote viewing, astral travel, alchemical marriages, which I'm very interested in finding out more about, as well as utilizing many other esoteric teachings, which we're going to get into today. And I want to also get your insights into the spiritual state of the collective, as well as how it's affecting our reality. There are some very interesting things going on right now. I'm actually very encouraged about the way things are unfolding, but we'll get your insights into that. Before we get into any of this, this is your first time on. Tell us more about yourself and what led you down your path.
Well, I was born for it, so that's the that's the best way I can put it. But I was a very intuitive child, so I was a starseed child. I was an empath and an indigo soul, and I remember being around 2 years old, and I had a very difficult childhood with a mentally ill mother and a father that was gone in lots of ways. And I just remember being highly guided by spirit guides as a little toddler. And eventually, at age 4, I drowned. And then throughout my life, I went through a lot of ritual child abuse and all kinds of other things that caused me to be, I guess, have a very difficult time coping with the human world. And at the same time that was happening, I was a psychic child, so I was seeing a lot of spirits and dead people, and that was really also challenging. So I was kind of getting it from both sides. And but I remember having spirit guides guiding me through as a very young child. I even had prophetic dreams as early as 4 or 5 years old that I can remember being guided on things that turned out to unfold in my life. So when I say I was born for it, I was definitely born for it. And I was very, very in tune as a small kid. It took a long time, though, it took me until I was in my 30s for me to really understand spiritually and esoterically what was happening in the spirit world to me and for me and why I was here.
Were there any particular events that helped you come to the understanding that you have now, or at least started you on that path?
Well, I had multiple near-death experiences. I was astral traveling as a teenager. I was very well aware that I was astral traveling. I had a brother that I astral traveled with, and we would meet in the dream state together. So that was really interesting that he and I had been shown by the spirit world that I had traveled to this planet with him also. I had dreams of people being born. I had dreams. I met my nephew before he was born. I dreamt of my grandmother's passing before she died. I had a lot of those. And then later in my 30s, I had an absolute full-blown Kundalini activation. I was taken off planet. I was taken into the other star systems. I met the Pleiadians. I met the Lyrans. I was shown the whole story of humanity. And there is where I met my celestial alchemical partner. And so, yeah, I had a lot of events leading up to it, but then in my 30s, I had profound contactee experiences and full-blown enlightenment, Christ consciousness activations, 12-strand activations, big time stuff.
When you first introduced yourself, you were talking about how basically traumatic experiences in a way had opened up your perception. And I noticed this about a lot of people who are quote unquote star seeds, have this awareness, that this connection to the spiritual, to the other side. Trauma doesn't always lead you there. It can also shut you down in certain ways. But I would think that it's certain types of traumatic experiences that trigger different parts of your consciousness to respond and awaken in different ways. Would you agree?
I don't know if I would say it like that. I kind of get where you're going with that, but I really think it's how the person interpret how they interpret their experiences.
Mm.
And so I know in my case, I've had lots and lots of types of are we still there?
Yes, we're
Oh,
here.
okay. Something was showing up on the screen here. I can't see you anymore. But I'll just say that in my own personal experience, I had a lot of different types of traumas that some of my siblings also had, and each of us handled it differently. And I'm the only one that went through Christ consciousness activation. So I don't know if it's really so much that a specific type of trauma will affect your brain a certain way as it is just how you're able to interpret and decode what you're experiencing and then decode what it means to you spiritually.
Mm. Earlier, all you also mentioned that you had communication with your guides from an early age, I believe. My guides had showed up at just the right time. It was a few years ago, and I was pretty lost with the direction that I really wanted to go in my life. And my guide showed up through a meditative experience, prepared me for a lot of the consciousness exploration that I was doing, and also introduced themselves because they knew I'd be going into somewhat dangerous territories at time when I was participating in a lot of the consciousness exploration, plant medicines, things like that I was utilizing. How did you come into contact with your guides? Did they introduce themselves? Were you in some sort of meditative state? How did that happen?
Well, for me, because it started when I was really young, I had a particular sister that really tried to off me a lot of times. She tried to get rid of me. And she would oftentimes take me up into big public events and drop me off and leave me there so that I would maybe get kidnapped or not show up back home. And so I just remember being a super small and being very guided on how to get back to the house, like a little tiny kid, and I walked miles to find my way back home at age 4. So it was a very much they were talking to me and I was hearing them, but I was also very much a dreamer and I was given a lot of prophetic dreams too. So they worked with me that way as well. But I guess for me, I could hear them. I could talk to them in my dreams. Like I was understanding what they were showing me as a very young person. Now, I did try to close that off in myself in my 20s and tried to fit into the 3D world. That didn't last me very long. So they weren't having any of that from me. So,
Talk a little bit about your understandings of the connections between what we understand as the astral realms, dream states, altered states, these experiences where we come into contact with intelligences that seem to be non-human. They seem to all be connected, even near-death experiences. And when people have out-of-body experiences, there's all these profound connections. And from the very few really profound spiritual experiences that I've had, that is one of the most obvious things that is always evident during these experiences is how they somehow all seem to connect. What's your
yeah.
understanding of that connection?
Well, the truth is the truth is the truth. And so when you have all these people from different religious backgrounds popping out of their bodies and going into other realms and coming back with the same story, it's something you should pay attention to. But I will say too that a lot of NDEers and stuff, they have some of them have differing experiences because some see a lot of light and some see a lot of dark, right?
Mm.
And some of the reason that that happens is because they're getting into different dimensions and there's multiple dimensions out there, many dimensions. And a lot of people will either only end up in the fourth dimension, which is the lower astral. And in the lower astral, there's all kinds of things, demonic entities, all sorts of types of beings. You could call it the terrestrial kingdom, if you will, although there's many other dimensions that terrestrials exist in. But the lower astral tends to be where all the gunk is. It's not the lower world. We have an underworld here on Earth as well, but we also have a lower astral. And so people who have near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences will tap into that. They'll get freaked out and they'll leave. Sometimes they do psychedelics. They'll tap into that and then they freak out or they get mentally ill or they end up in mental hospitals. It's true.
Yeah.
So the reason why is because their frequency isn't fully ready to go into higher dimensions. And also those dimensions are protected by guardians. So some people can have near-death experiences or come out of body and be really in a pure state energetically and be able to get into higher dimensions, and they see angels and they see all kinds of other things that are more on the positive side. So that's kind of what's going on. But again, there's multiple dimensions. And we exist within all of those dimensions because we're multidimensional. And so when somebody says, oh, aliens are bad, well, some are and some are good, just like humans. Some are good and some are not. And so when you get into multidimensionality, there are many layers of the soul body and they exist in different dimensions. And so when you have a near-death experience and you go into the lower astral, you're just tapping into that lower part of yourself and you're seeing what's there. You have a little more high frequency and you get into 5D or higher, well, then you see that part of yourself too. And it goes on and on. And so.
Right. It's so interesting that in mainstream understandings and researchers that claim that there are really no real physical evidence for any of the things that we're discussing right now, any of the layers of reality, the multidimensional layers that even exists. But if you look at some of the things that experiencers or contactees take away with them, they do have things like metamaterials that we can take into our reality, like implants, or even certain physical manifestations that occur after people have a spiritual experience, like maybe a stigmata or a symbol or a scar that was on them that wasn't on them before this experience. So it seems like things in these realms can carry over into the physical and have very real physical effects in our reality.
Well, I agree. And I would say that actually we do have technologies that have been designed to help us bring forth physical verification of what we know etherically. And the problem is that it becomes a power struggle with the elites or with the powers that be, because they want the control over those technologies that are actually technologies that belong to God. And you can see that happening through AI right now. AI is trying to take over. If you just you Google about ascension, and AI is trying to be the guru on ascension now instead of it being some sentient divine intelligence. They hijacked that from the humans. And so that's kind of the problem that happened with Nikola Tesla, where he brought forth, he was a truly actualized Christed being who had traveled the dimensions and came back with knowledge from the higher realms and brought it forth and created a technology to present the fact that we can time travel. And they hijacked that from him. It's a power struggle. And that's really what's going on. But we are finally, I think, starting to get to a point where science is sort of catching up with the mystics, and we're being able to kind of prove it. But again, we have to be careful with that, because now we're still in a conflict between dark forces and light forces. And if the dark forces get a hold of some of these technologies and really utilize them, it's going to be detrimental to every being in the universes and the multiverses.
Well, let's get into the dark forces, because this is something I believe a lot of folks in this community still don't have a strong understanding of. Maybe we're not supposed to, but I want to get your insights into who and what we're talking about when we're talking about these dark forces. Would you consider them demons? Is it just humans at the top that have connected to some sort of negative egregores or thought forms that are trying to guide humanity in certain ways? How do you see these intelligences and how they affect us and what they really are?
Okay. Well, first, before I answer that, I just want to say that in the highest aspect of our being and in the most enlightened state of being, it's all love. Everything is love. We all come from God. And it's all a beautiful story and an orchestra that's playing out in the human world and also in other dimensions. So I'm just putting that out there first. But then I want to say that, again, because we're multidimensional, our Earth, the Earth plane, is in a very low state of consciousness compared to other dimensional realities. Even the 4D demonic entities that exist in the lower astral are more high intelligence than most humans. And so humans have been kind of, and it's a long story, connected to the Anunnakis, and so anybody that wants to research that can. But so there's a lot of stuff that happened along the way that kind of stripped and dumbed down the human, who was originally designed in the reflection of God. And so, and that's where we go into. I got my video taken down off of YouTube over this because they don't want us to talk about the fact that our been hijacked. Well, it has. And you think that all that in your body is really junk? Do you really think that the divine creator made junk? Or do you think that perhaps something along the way caused it to get damaged? And so in my experience, from personal experience, I had all of my reactivated etherically in my body, and it went back to 12 and then 24 strand resurrection in my own being. Of course, that happens etherically as we do our spiritual work. But there is a lot to be said about the fact that humans have been altered. So I just want to say that. And then, of course, all of these other energies that are beyond the 3D world are more high intelligence, including the lower astral. But for those of us who have come out of body and traveled into the dimensions, we're called star walkers, then we have seen other energies. And in my personal experience, I've absolutely seen demonic energies playing out and working with humans. And you could call them negative ETs, because a lot of them are. Demons, negative ETs, same thing. Okay. Angels, positive ETs, same thing. Because again, we're talking multidimensionality here. And so, yeah, absolutely. The things that are happening on Earth with a lot of the beings who are on Earth, some of them are actually incarnated ETs that are nefarious. Some of them are incarnated angels that are in the living flesh as humans. And so that's why you have to test every spirit, because there are beings on this planet that come from galaxies away from here, and you don't know who they are unless you really feel into who they are and what they're doing. Well, when you start to look at some of the things that are unfolding on Earth, the negative things that are happening on Earth, it's almost, if you really understand the Christ codes and Christed alignment, it's almost very easy to see beings that are not serving the divine will or God. Right? It becomes so easy to see because the things that they're doing are absolutely demonic, satanic, Luciferian.
Well,
they are working for dark forces.
I've had countless guests that have had experiences where they have been taken on what seem to be craft, interact with these beings that basically perform medical experimentation. They take eggs, sperm, they do experiments, and then they are sometimes taken again and they meet their hybrid children that are supposedly being created through these experiments. Do you think that these hybrids are being implemented into humanity somehow, or do you think these experiences are more of a human-based military abduction scenario?
I think they're very legitimately real experiences, and I don't think it's just a military experiment, although I think there's some truth that some of it is. The military is involved in some of that too. But absolutely, that's I've seen the same thing, and I've been part of those experiments too, and they're actually very real. We're all hybrids in some way or another. But that story goes all the way. It goes even prior to Christ, honestly. A lot of people say, oh, it's a Christ bloodline thing. Well, in some ways, yes, they are definitely tracking the bloodline of Christ, because the story of Christ and Mary Magdalene is very distorted. And they were actually twin flames, and they actually had children. And that wasn't brought forth into the public because, well, we know that there's a lot of control that people gain when they create mega churches, right? And so the story itself is corrupt. It's not true. And there's that, but also it goes way further back into the story of the Anunnakis and how alien beings who weren't supposed to come onto the earth plane came in and started to have sex with the feminines that were here, and they started to take their eggs and create hybrid races so that they could make a slave race out of humanity. And that goes right back into our DNA being altered.
When it comes to the nature of what this experience is, what we're on here, do you believe that this planet, this Earth, is something that is more of an experiment, that even us as humans were created as some experiment by these interdimensional beings? Or is this experience for us, by us, created to as a spiritual experience to grow our consciousness? There's so many different explanations that people try and explore that come on this show, and I'm interested in hearing all the different perspectives.
Yeah, there are a lot of different perspectives about it. I'll just speak on what I was shown.
Mm.
And so as I understand it, and as I was shown, well, we came onto this earth plane by source, and we were God seeds. We were children of God, and we came here to be able to live a utopian life. This was originally the Garden of Eden, this beautiful paradise planet that the children of God could live in peace. And yes, we were hijacked by Anunnaki or ET beings, who, by the way, have hijacked other planetary systems and destroyed them, including Lyra, Mintaka, Orion, even the Andromedan Wars. If you research those, you'll kind of hear a little bit of history that we're repeating in a karmic cycle here because we still haven't been able to overcome those beings. But as I understand it, they came and they weren't supposed to do what they did to the humans, and they altered the humans. They came, they started to pillage the earth and to take the minerals out of the earth. They came for the gold, they came for the minerals. They're still doing it. They're doing it in Utah, they're doing it in Africa, they're doing it all over the place. But so they came in, they want to hijack the minerals. Well, they didn't want to have to do the work. And so we're talking like draconian beings and other subgroups of ET beings that would be called predator ETs, basically. And so then, and if you study the story of Enki and Enlil, it was like one positive brother and one negative brother. So you could kind of look at them almost like the story of Jesus and Satan, if you've heard the story of Jesus and Satan, because one wanted to give them free will and one didn't. And so ultimately they began to alter the races, as I understand, and that they started to create different subgroups of beings by altering DNA. And I've seen a video that really resonated for me where the man was saying that they actually were so intelligent that they created specific subgroups where you could just look at the people. And so if you look at different races and you see the different features that they have, and their noses are different, and their eyes are different, and things, that they did that. So that it was almost like a branding of those beings. Oh, these are the slaves for this person, and these are the slaves for this person. So that, I don't know if that part's true, but it really resonated for me because I know the story of the Anunnakis. And so, but anyhow, I think that answered your question.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think's happening now, especially since we entered this decade and all the insanity that's unfolded with the pandemic and everything that's happening now, wars, rumors of wars, alien discussions in the mainstream? Why do you think that this is unfolding during this time period? And also, what do you think is happening with the people that are awakening? Is it just a response to the insanity, or is there more happening on a larger scale?
Well, yeah, that's a loaded question. That's a lot to answer, but but
We've got time.
okay, all right, good. So the whole internet thing was designed to be another way to kind of control the masses, right? And it backfired because it caused a rapid spreading of knowledge that caused a hundredth monkey effect in the minds and consciousness of every human being.
Yeah.
And that caused us to open up and be able to receive a lot more light on a very quick level. So we have evolved as a collective species more in 10 years than we have in the last, and that would have taken us 1,000 years before to get to collectively this much awareness all around the world. And so it was a massive awakening for everybody just by having access to that information. Because if you think about it, prior to the internet, if you really wanted information about mystery schools, or you really wanted information about astral traveling or sacred knowledge or those types of things, you would have to travel to some other country, and you'd have to have a lot of money to do it, and you'd have to pay to get into these schools. Well, now it's like click, 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 click. Everybody's getting access to information that's completely causing us to have a recalibration in our carbon bodies, turning us into crystalline. Because what is DNA? DNA is bandwidth. It's like the cords that you use to wire your telephone wire. It's bandwidth of information. And so as we're getting information on a much more rapid scale, it's recalibrating our DNA naturally. Now, if you're getting the wrong information on the internet, which a lot of people are, you're not recalibrating your DNA, you're redistorting your DNA, and it's keeping you out of alignment. That's why they call it the matrix, that checkerboard of truth and lies. And so you as an individual have to learn how to separate the truth from the lies through everything that you're seeing, whether it be a newspaper you're reading or the Bible or any other religious text or anything you're listening to, the QAnons or whoever it is. Then you have to go in there and you still have to separate what's truth from what's lies through your soul. And you really have to, again, this is why working with your own intuition is so important, because your intuition will show you, okay, this is true. Okay, what they're saying, they actually mean this. There's a lot to be said about metaphors when you're getting into spirituality. But anyway, so that's happening, and that's happening on a collective level, and these people are getting bombarded with all this information. And so why are we getting all these different pieces of information? Why is one person saying this and one person saying that? Well, now you get into the multidimensionality too, and you have to determine, well, is that soul fully activated, or are they just activated in 3D or 4D or 5D? Because if you're listening to them and they're only this far evolved, but they're not this far evolved, then what they're saying is going to be true to them in that particular state of consciousness. But when they get into higher states of consciousness, they're probably going to shift the way that they're seeing it. And so all the while that we're dealing with all the stuff that's happening online and all the information we're getting, we're also, you need to understand that whether that person is a fully ascended soul or not is going to matter as to whether you take everything they're saying to heart.
Even my perspective is constantly shifting about the bigger picture and what could be unfolding right now. At first, it seems like they're trying to bring about the end of the world and depopulate the world. And then it seems like, oh man, they played their hand and people are starting to see through this and wake up. And then you get to another layer of it to where it seems like it's just all unfolding how it should. And the system has to collapse either way. It's all going to happen because it needs to be destroyed in order to bring about something new, because we can't keep going with this corrupt from the foundation system that we've been living under. Has to be destroyed somehow. So the way it happens is going to be up to us. It can either be through World War III and global chaos, or we can make it a nice, smooth transition, which it seems like the more we collectively become aware, the easier it is to navigate through the madness, and maybe the less of a hit we're going to collectively take as madness unfolds, basically.
Yeah, and I would say too that we don't really want it all to collapse. That's what they want. They really want it to collapse, because then they can come in and be the heroes of the day and take everything. Well, you see that with all the land grabs that they're doing. Now, with that said, there is such a thing as death and rebirth cycles in the universe, and we do need that. We need the old ways to die and the new ways to be birthed, and we are the creators of the new earth. We are the creators of the new way. It's us who has to take charge.
Mm.
And this is where we get into a little trouble when we've been taught by our religious backgrounds that we have to wait for some savior to come, when that
Yes.
is not really the way. We are the savior,
Yeah.
and we have to, and it's Christ comes back through us. The return of Christ happens internally, and it has already happened to many beings on the earth right now who are already the Christ's return through them. And so, and it can happen to anybody. That's your ultimate ability, your highest self, and your highest capacity is to become a Christed being yourself. Well, we know that the religious backgrounds have kind of taken it a different way, but we also know that they have lots of control and they're doing nefarious things. So, it seems like that story got distorted maybe for a reason that's not positive. When you shift the way that you look at that story and you understand that it's an internal thing, that Christ said, ye are gods, it's you who has to follow me, be like me, live like, be Christ-like. That's when you actually embody it. And that's what we're being called to do on earth right now, is to embody our Christed selves so that we can end the occult programs, the Luciferian control over the world, which is very much been looshing the souls and causing reincarnation cycles instead of letting them have eternal life, which was God's original design for us.
I've never seen spells being broken so rapidly in such a short amount of time. It seems like every day there's something new that just bursts through the veil, and people are like, oh, that was bullshit, and it keeps happening and it's snowballing. It's such a fun time to be alive, man.
It is. It's awesome. I'm glad you can see that, because it is amazing, and I agree. Ancestral healing and collective karma is being smashed through right now. We have more to do, but definitely it's an awesome time to be here and to witness what's happening. And I think that the more that people that awaken and step into this and take their power back and start to become embodied beings, embodied high soul beings, this world was intended to be utopian. That was always its design. And the more of us that are coming in and running this frequency into the earth, it's causing a collective activation in all other souls, and it's also lifting the earth herself, because she was descending and falling and coming out of the, what do you call it, the prana, where she was connected to her masculine. So the masculine feminine imbalance on earth itself began to cause us to be a complete fall system, and many souls from all over galaxies came in and heard the call and came in to help, because as we're running the frequency into the earth, it's also causing her to recalibrate and realign in her natural state, and therefore she can go through the ascension portal very rapidly. So it's pretty amazing. Like, really, the energy work that we're doing is so extraordinary as a collective. Even if people aren't fully ascended, some of them are still feeling the call, even if they don't understand it all, and they're doing a lot of great work out there, and it's absolutely incredible, the orchestra that's happening in all the different multiple dimensions.
Do you think as the collective awareness continues to expand that we will start to witness and be able to perceive some of the things that we're speaking about earlier, some of the intelligences and energies that exist right here beyond our perception? But if we become maybe more aware, that we can tap into some of these abilities that we probably used to have, that our ancient ancestors were able to tap into. What do you think?
It's already happening. Many of us are already fully telepathic, and also fully able to restore and do what we call galactic healing. That's one of the modalities that I work with, is galactic healing, where I work with galactic beings that come in and create healing for the vessel. There's no need for med beds. There's no need for surgeries. There's no need for those things because they can happen on an etheric, energetic level, literally through galactic's help. And oftentimes we call it psychic surgeries, where they can come in. And if you've seen videos of mine, I've been able to literally just talk to somebody and see that they have infections or that they have an issue with their mesh from their hernia or whatever is going on inside their body. I can already see inside their body and see what's going on with them. It's here. And it's not the whole med bed thing, even though that'll be great to have the physical, version of it. But again, we don't need the physical version of it. We need the energetic version of it. That's really all we ever needed.
Well, let's get into some of the things that you work with, some of your modalities, starting with what you just mentioned, psychic surgery. Tell us a little bit more about this and maybe some examples of how this works.
Well, like I said, I recently had a woman about a year ago that came to me and I was able to see into her face and I saw really deep in there that she had an infection and I intuitively knew that it was really a bad situation for her. So I told her about it. I didn't see her again for about a year, and then she came back to me and told me that she followed my advice and went and got a real deep 3D X-ray, and they did in fact find the infection there, and she would have lost her jaw if she didn't go in and get it resolved.
Oh, wow.
I've had other situations where I've had, because there are what's called J-seal implants or ET implants, where ETs have reverse chakras. There's chakra reversals, and there's also ET implants and other types of issues that happen to the soul body that they're doing etherically to you, to your body, and somehow you're unconsciously allowing it because you're living out of alignment and you don't know how. Well, they're catching your soul body and they're actually getting hooks in it and creating ET hooks and ET implants in your body. And so that's when we do some psychic surgery to remove that and to realign you and to help you become aware of what happened and why it happened so that you can set your soul free, because you have a light body, an astral body, a shadow body, a emotional body, mental body, physical body. You have all these layers of bodies also. And the dark forces, if you will, they know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what they're doing in multiple dimensions too. Most humans are very unaware of what's happening to them in the astral realms. And I'll give you another example. Mm-hmm. Somebody very close to me, I don't want to say who because I don't want her to have to be exposed this way, but somebody very, very, very close to me was being astrally raped in the 4D. And I saw it because they're so close to me. I'm a protector for that being. And I was shown that was happening to her. And so I called her to ask her how she was doing. And she was unaware why I was calling. And she was talking to me about how she had a dream a night or two before. And she thought it was her husband. And it turned out not to be her husband, that she was having sex and he was being rough to her because she was being astrally raped. And she just thought it was a dream, but it wasn't. And so I was able to help her heal that so that she could create a shield around herself so that they couldn't access her. And I had to help her see why they were getting access to her. So there are things like that happening in the astral realms that most people are completely unaware of. And whether it be that they need a surgery or whether it be that they need some other type of issue, there's some other way for them to protect themselves, then I'm able to see that and help them.
This is something that I've encountered myself. What are some ways that folks can become more aware that they are being either attacked in these realms, or they have some sort of parasitic attachment or some sort of negative energy that's interacting with them that they're not aware of? Is there any way that people can become aware or just notice things in their waking everyday life that are clues?
There's so many, because they have so many ways to access you. And it can be, you can notice it through depression. If you're dealing with constant chronic depression, you're probably being very, very much loosed. If you are dealing with, just like I said, dreams that are weird or scary, there might be some reason why, and you should look into it. If you're waking up and you're like, "Ooh, that was a creepy dream" or something, well, there's probably more to it than just a dream. A lot more to it than just a dream. Your dreams are showing you something. And sometimes it can be if you're sick. If you're sick, they love to feed on sickness. They love to feed on all kinds of things. So it can be all types of things. But I would say that if you're feeling depression, that's a big one. If you're feeling suicidal thoughts, that's huge. You need to understand that that is not your soul talking to you. That's not
Mm.
your soul. That is something nefarious trying to tell you to take that path. That's not the way. It's not going to get you out of your pain, because even when you pop out of your skin, you're still you. You don't get to just escape that way. That's not how it works. That's just a lie. And it's coming from nefarious beings. Um, but yeah, there's a lot, and it just depends on the person and what's happening in their life. But there can be so many ways.
Mm. Now, what would be, to your best understanding, the motivation for a negative entity to get someone to take their own life? Is it a form of energy feeding or something like that?
Oh, totally. There's that, but also in a way it's kind of like a war against God, if you will.
Mm.
Um, Certainly they feed on that, just like they do when they take a little child and drink their blood.
Now, let's get to some of the other things that you're working with. One of the things that I'm very interested in is alchemical marriages. I've never heard this before. Tell us a little bit about what this is.
Well, thank heavens you went this way instead of the other way, because hold on, I got to shift out of that whole negative subject and get over here. But
Let's shift.
okay, well, the alchemical marriage is the most extraordinary, I would say, a reward from heaven when you align your soul and graduate the earth paradigm. So it's a celestial marriage. Um, and it happens for souls that go through Christ consciousness and enlightenment. And so once a soul reaches and achieves enlightenment, which is again your highest state of being, it's when you become a guru, a real guru, then you have ascended beyond the time matrix and come through all of those dimensions and healed yourself through all of those dimensions, because there's things you have to do in order to get to all of those, through all those stargates. And when the soul reaches enlightenment and graduates samsara cycles, they come into union with their celestial alchemical partner.
Tell us a little bit about that. Is celestial alchemical partner, is that something similar to the term we hear like twin flames?
Well, it is the twin flame,
Okay.
but unfortunately, the subject itself has been completely hijacked by the collective, who most of which have not gone through enlightenment. So it's a term that they're all feeling and liking and resonating with, but it's also something that a lot of them are confusing. And because of that, it creates a lot of also soul harvesting,
Mm.
because there's reasons why the nefarious forces created so much confusion around that subject also. But it can cause soul loss if you're thinking that somebody is your celestial partner over here and you're going over here for them, but your celestial partner's really over here. You're actually coming further away from your soul than coming into union with your soul. And so it can be troubling if it's not the actual one. And so it's a confusing subject for most of humanity, but it's because a lot of people are trying to reach for the lover instead of reaching for God.
Mm.
And when your path, when your spiritual path is your number one priority and you're searching for God, that's the way, not the other way around. And so it unfortunately, there's a lot of massive confusion around that subject in the collective, and a lot of people talking about it that really are not there yet. And we
Hmm.
want them to get there. But it's
Yeah.
sad because I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and I've worked with people who for 10 or 15 years or even 20 years had been following the wrong mate, thinking that it was their celestial partner, and it wasn't, partially because they hadn't gone through full-blown enlightenment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a gift of enlightenment, if you will.
Now, since you mentioned some of the terms in this community being misunderstood, there's so many misunderstandings about a ton of concepts, not only in the spiritual and truther community, but as it relates to people trying to understand as an outsider some of the things that we're talking about. It becomes very difficult, but there's also an infiltration right now because it's becoming dangerous for those in power. They realize that this awakening is causing people to become aware of things, and they can't have that. So what they're doing is infiltrating some of these movements, either putting people in here to give out horrible, bad information and lead people down the wrong path, or they're introducing themselves to new upcomers who seem to have popularity, and they're saying, hey, we'll throw you this, or you do this and you'll get some notoriety. And it's all about infiltrating these movements so that to try and prevent it, basically, to try and prevent us from fully awakening. Are you seeing some of that?
I almost want to, I mean, the energy that comes to me when you talk about that is I want to vomit, because there is so much of it. And I was thinking in particular of a couple of people who are in the spiritual community, because they infiltrate the spiritual community. And by the way, those are Omicron beings, which are the white Dracos. They're masters at war, including the spiritual war, and they know exactly how to get in there and present themselves like the brightest shining lights that there are. And they're actually nefarious beings. And I've seen it happen in the spiritual community where, let's say, for example, I'm going to use one woman in particular. She speaks light language. She's really cute, cutesy, and everything's just, if you think it, it'll be. And if you don't think it's going to make you sick, it's not going to make you sick. And light and love. But all the fancy stuff, the light language, big audience, everything. And she's really in the false light. And the false light is another layer of consciousness that the souls will have to go through in order to fully ascend at some point. But you need to be aware of that when you're watching people, because her version of teaching is false, because she is disconnected from the physical manifestation. She doesn't understand manifestation mechanics. And she's teaching people that if they just think a thought, they can overcome things. But I'm going to use the breast implants as an example, because this is what she was telling them, that if you have breast implants and you think that they're not going to make you sick, they won't. But that's absolutely not true. Your mind alone is not, you can't just think one way and act another way. That's disembodied. That's disconnected, distorted. And so you have to watch that with people when you're following them, because they will lead you to hell, if you will. Okay. Hell being a state of consciousness, but they're going to lead you right there where you're going to suffer, and you're going to suffer hard because you believed something that was not true. And so you really have to be careful with that. But yes, they've infiltrated everything. And so, yeah, as much as we love free speech, we also caution you to be careful and use discernment, because, some people are speaking when they should be shutting up.
I like to get folks' thoughts on the ultimate solution to things that we're facing right now and how to navigate our way through some of the more difficult periods that we may be heading into. And some of the easiest solutions that I've come across and use in my own life is don't participate with the BS. Don't purchase their products. Don't interact with the agendas. Don't get sucked into those negative polarities that they're trying to force you into. If you don't interact with their game, you check out from the system. You check out and you're an outsider, and you get to observe everything and make your own reality. And that's the way that I have been navigating so far. Any advice for folks along those lines?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. That, engaging is exactly what they want you to do. And it's agreeing to plug your spiritual circuits into something that is not in your highest timeline. And if we're going to jump this timeline as a collective, which is a big deal, then we can't, you have to unplug your circuits from it. Now that being said, that doesn't mean to bypass awareness about it, which a lot of people are doing. Oh, I don't want to see it. I don't want to think about it. I'm just going to focus on light and love. And that's not healthy either, because part of the work that we need to do is we need to clear out the shadow body of the collective. And that means that we have to look at what's happening with the underground tunnels. We have to look at what's happening with adrenochrome. We have to look at what's happening in Hollywood and in the government and why there's so much corruption. And we have to face everything and rise. If we don't face it, then we are not going to actually create the new world by avoidance. And child molestation is one of those topics to prove that to you. Over all the decades that everybody pretended it wasn't there and pretended they didn't see it and shushed everybody up at church and nobody can talk about it, and it just grew and grew and grew and grew until it's such a huge monster right now. We have no choice but to face it and beat it.
Yeah.
That's the way. But it doesn't mean engage in it, and it doesn't mean plug your circuits into it and play along with them and play the duking it out. No, jump your energy out of there, but start to figure out how you can do something of service to help work in a new way instead of the old way.
Now's a really bad time to be on the wrong side of history and have terrible skeletons in your closet, because it's all coming out. It doesn't matter who you are. The truth is oozing out of the walls right now, right?
That's right. And I would say to anybody listening that may have skeletons in your closet, because I think that a lot of people have made dumb choices in life in
Right.
their younger years, maybe. Make peace with yourself.
Yeah.
Face it and make peace with it and understand why it was wrong and change, so that you can step forward and take the role that you need to serve the light instead of hiding in the shadows of what happened once in your past. Forgiveness is part of the plan for you.
Mm.
So you can be forgiven for what you've done, as long as you face it and you understand why it was wrong and you change. That's the key, is you have to make the choice to change. And nobody on this planet is perfect. And so once you make peace with it, there's nothing anybody can say to you that's going to bother you. Yep, I did that and I changed and I'm a better person now. And that's
Great.
that's the way. So don't be afraid.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, manifestation and manifestation mechanics, when you were discussing the young lady talking about the breast implant infections and things like that. But when we're talking about real manifestation, the things that occur in our lives that seem to be miraculous, that connect to the path we're on and connect to the synchronistic events, if we follow those messages and the puzzle pieces from the universe in the right way, these things will manifest. Well, you said something very interesting, manifestation mechanics. Tell us a little bit about your understanding of how this works.
Oh, that's a whole college course, really.
Well, let's try and
Well,
condense it into 15 minutes if possible.
I'll try. Okay, I'll try. So I would just say that again, because you're multidimensional, you have to get your energy to match up in all of the layers of yourself.
Hmm.
And in her case, where she was talking about the mental body, she was referring to the mind and the power of the mind, and she was all focused on that and thinking that. And by the way, that's a kind of an Abrahamic belief structure, that it's all mental. She was very disconnected to the feminine essence, the root of her being, and the womb of creation. The womb of creation, in her case, she was disconnected from. And so because of that, she will never be able to fully manifest in a pure alignment, because she doesn't have the womb energy connected to herself. She's all up here in the mind. She's not in the work of it. The womb. If you think about birthing a child into existence, it doesn't just happen because you thought you wanted a baby,
Mm.
right? The seed goes into the womb, and the child gets gestated in the womb for months, and it's painful and it's traumatic and it takes a lot of work, and you have to move through it and grow it and then birth it into existence.
Yeah.
That's how it really works. It doesn't work by just thinking a thought. And that's where we have a lot of distorted stuff in the spiritual community. Yes, our thoughts are the mustard seed. They're the beginning of creation. That's the seed, the man's seed going into the womb. Yes, that's wonderful. Great. We had the thought. But where does the real birthing come from? In the womb. That's the feminine energy. And most people, because we've had these Abrahamic religions that have stripped the feminine codes out of humanity, there is a complete, there's no way that humanity is going to ascend until they reconnect to the feminine mother God energy. And that's part of the codes of creation. That's part of the mechanics of creation.
How would you describe the connection to synchronicity, synchromistic events that we experience in our lives, and the ultimate outcome of what we're trying to achieve? I consider it as the universe telling me I'm on the right path. If I don't pay attention to the messages that it's telling me, I'm not going to reach my ultimate desired goal. I'm not going to be exactly where I'm at. But if I tend to pay closer attention to what's unfolding around me and these messages and synchronicities that the universe shows me, the ultimate outcome is more aligned with my true desired outcome. What do you think about that?
Oh, I totally agree. That's universe or God or whatever you want to call it is so divinely intelligent and so omnipresent in all of our lives that all we have to do is kind of tune into that frequency. It's like a radio frequency. And once you're tuned into it, you will see the synchronicities. You will have things lining up for you. You will be on guardian time. When you get those little 1111s or 222s or whatever, it's usually not because you're sitting there looking at the clock, right? You're just
Right.
in your flow. You're in a flow state and you just happen to glance over it. It's 222. Well, that's guardian time that you're on there. That's kind of what's happening there is they're showing you you're connecting to the spirit, the essence of life, instead of up here in your mind where you get a lot of monkey mind chaos.
Right on, right on. Now, for the last few minutes we have, tell us a little bit more about everything that you offer, how the audience can find you, and all the good stuff you got out there.
Okay. Well, I do galactic records through the Akashic records. I do Akashic record reading. I do twin flame alchemy, tantric healing, kundalini healing, astral. Like I teach on how to open your third eye, and how to get you to astral travel, which you first have to do through energetic work and healing your energy. I do, what else do I do? Medical mediumship. I channel spirits. I work a lot with people's passed over loved ones because that's connected to ancestral healing. So I do ancestral healing and clearing timelines for people. Gosh, it's hard to say. You can go to my website, ellenred.com. There's kind of a list there. There's a lot more coming, but the website that we have up right now, there's plenty of stuff for you to see there that I do. And of course, I teach mystery school teachings. I teach angel anatomy for your angelic template so that you can embody the Christed template that we're talking about. And on my website, ellenred.com, you can go to all of my other, you can find me on YouTube and TikTok and X and Instagram on there. All the links are there on the website. So that's the easiest place for you to go and find them.
Excellent. Ellen, thank you so much. This was fantastic. I'd love to get deeper with you in the future sometime. And
Okay.
until next time, everyone, have an excellent evening.